Hello, and welcome to week 5 of Nutrition, Health, and Lifestyle Issues and Insights. This week, we're going to explore plant-based diets. We're going to look at their benefits, talk about some of the particular nutrition considerations that might go along with these type diets, and also just give some general guidelines. You're going to hear some practical information, both from some product reviews and grocery lists that I'll share. And also, we're going to interview a Vanderbilt student who has been a vegan for 5 years and just talk about her choices, her experiences, and some advice from her. We're going to talk about soy foods, organic foods, genetically modified foods, and one part at the end, we're going to talk about characteristics of populations that live the longest and the healthiest, in part because one of the common characteristics is an emphasis on plant foods in their diets. And that's how we'll wrap up this week. Plant-based diets, and what do we mean by plant-based diets? Plant-based diets are really when you emphasize whole plant foods. Whole foods that are as close to the natural, quote, state as possible. Minimal refined grains, minimal additives and preservatives, and most plant-based diets either exclude or only include a moderate to minimal amount of animal foods. We're going to look at some of the spectrum of plant-based diets in terms of how much or little animal foods they might include. In terms of vegetarianism, which is a plant-based diet, it's one that oftentimes excludes or minimizes animal foods. When you look at how many folks in particularly the U.S. are vegetarian, about 5% report following a vegetarian diet. About 2% report being vegan, and we'll look at what that is in a moment. Worldwide, hundreds of millions of people are vegetarians, sometimes by necessity, just either economic issues or even minimal availability of animal foods and animal protein sources. Vegetarians, including vegans, with careful planning, can meet all their nutritional recommendations at virtually every stage of life. And within the vegan and the vegetarian lifestyle and diets, that sometimes the role of fortified foods, of supplements can be important. And we've looked at both of those types of both supplements and also fortified foods in previous segments. But particularly within the vegetarian lifestyle, the stricter they are, the more likely that the use of fortified foods and supplements may be warranted. People are vegetarian for a host of reasons. One of the top reasons, of course, is health. We will look in one of the segments at some of the health benefits of a plant-based diet, and there are many. People sometimes have environmental concerns in terms of, quote, the carbon footprint they may have that's related to diet, ethical concerns, individuals that have animal rights issues, advocacy for animal rights. There's cultural and religious reasons for people following vegetarian type diets. And sometimes, as I mentioned before, there's just lack of availability or even the economic aspect of animal products. This is a survey from the Vegetarian Resource Group. It was a poll, a Gallup poll done in 2012 that looks at how often people include vegetarian type meals or plant-based meals. Overall, almost half of Americans report eating at least one, quote, vegetarian meal a week. Some more, some less, but that at least one meal, they're having a meal that is not animal food based. And actually, one of your assignments over this week is to actually try to include at least 2 plant-based or vegetarian meals in place of a meal where you might typically have an animal food. Many of you may already be vegetarian or vegans, and on the discussion board we'll share some comments about that, some experiences, some suggestions in terms of how you're living your life and what kind of diet you're following. Now, I wanted to go through just basically some of the basic vegetarian dietary patterns, just so that we kind of get our terms under control, so that you know when I'm speaking of certain things what I'm referring to. A vegan diet really eliminates all sources of animal products. It is composed of plant foods, beans, legumes, vegetables, fruits, grains. Lacto-vegetarian, lacto meaning milk, is a vegetarian type diet that excludes all animal products with the exception of using dairy foods as part of their diet, cheeses, milks, products like that. Lacto-ovo vegetarians, ovo being egg, are vegetarians that exclude meat, poultry, fish, animal foods, but still include dairy products and eggs in their diet. Quasi-vegetarians or pescatarians are individuals that exclude poultry and meats, but include fish in their diet, and they may or may not be including milk products and eggs. Far vegetarians are, quote, vegetarians that really are eating almost all foods with the exception of red meat, and they exclude red meats. And this makes up actually a pretty large percentage of what people consider vegetarian. There's all flexitarian or semi-vegetarian, and these are individuals that eat plant-based the majority of the time, but occasionally they may have even red meat, just in a smaller quantity. This is just a chart kind of showing what the different types of vegetarian diets may include or exclude, just to kind of summarize at a glance some of the things about the vegetarian styles of eating. One thing that we'll talk about over the course of this week is that, quote, the stricter, so to speak, a vegetarian is, the more nutritional considerations may be present. For example, vitamin B12 is only found in foods of animal origin. So vegans definitely need an extra source of vitamin B12, whether it be through supplements or whether it be through fortified foods. However, vegetarians that include dairy foods, eggs, or are more flexible, rarely is there an issue with vitamin B12 deficiency or inadequacies. One other type of diet, because sometimes you hear about this one, I just wanted to mention, we're not going to really talk about this a lot this week, but I just did want to throw the term out because people do ask me about it. It's the raw food diet. And this is really essentially a vegan diet, but it's based on uncooked foods, kind of focusing on the benefits of, quote, plant enzymes. Actually, when you look at the science, enzymes are inactivated by digestion, and there are also some potential health issues with raw food diets in terms of potential deficiencies and just some of the health problems that may come along with such an exclusion of types of foods. Also, when you look at individuals that follow raw food diets, sometimes their body weight's a little low for their height. They can still have very healthy levels, of course, of triglycerides and of blood lipids. But this is just one type that you sometimes hear about, and some people are very strong advocates of a raw food diet. And I guess with careful planning, this could potentially be healthy, but it's got a little more concern than even, say, a straight vegan diet. That gives a little bit of an overview of the types and some of the rationale for plant-based diets and vegetarian diets. In the next segment, we're going to take a look at some of the health benefits of following a plant-based diet. And I'll give you an overview of some scientific studies, some reviews, just to kind of support some of the evidence of the benefits that we find with plant-based diets.